Hey family, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a tough but important topic. Why your pastor won't preach about porn. There's a silent epidemic running through the church. It's a problem that impacts most congregations, destroys marriages, and cripples spiritual leaders, yet you almost never hear it mentioned from the pulpit. Think about this. Recent studies show that 54% of practicing Christians look at pornography, 75% of Christian men and 40% of Christian women admit they watch it. And this isn't just a problem in the pews, it's a crisis behind the pulpit. What if I told you that 2/3 of pastors have struggled, or are struggling right now with this exact same issue? That's not a guess. It's a statistic. 2 out of every 3 spiritual leaders standing on stage each Sunday have fought the pull of pornography. So, when was the last time you heard a sermon that actually dealt with it? This massive silence from our leaders begs an unsettling question. If the shepherds are struggling, who's protecting the flock? This is a look into the culture of fear and silence that's leaving millions of Christians to fight for themselves in a battle they are quietly losing. Section 1. An epidemic of silence. The numbers are just staggering. More than half the people in your church are dealing with pornography use. But you'd never know it on a Sunday morning. The issue has been called a spiritual cancer. Yet the one place that's supposed to be for spiritual healing, the church, is often the quietest. Research from Barna shows a huge disconnect between the reality in the seats and the sermons from the stage. And even though the problem is everywhere, real help is almost impossible to find. Only about 10% of churches have any kind of program to address pornography or sexual addiction. And it's not because people don't want help. Actually, 58% of churchgoers say it's important for their church to talk about it. They're looking for guidance, for hope, for a way out. But instead of finding a hospital for the soul, many find a museum for saints, where everyone pretends their struggles don't exist. This silence creates a crushing stigma. Christians who struggle with porn say they feel extreme guilt and shame, way more than the general population. So, why the silence? They're afraid of being judged or rejected if they confess, so they stay quiet, trapped in a cycle of sin and isolation that the silence just makes worse. The very community that was designed to bring healing becomes a source of fear. Section 2. The pastor's prison of fear. Why would pastors, of all people, dodge a topic that is so clearly wrecking their congregations? The answer is complicated and deeply human. First off, like the stats show, most of them are fighting the same battle. A whopping 86% of pastors believe porn use is common among their friends in ministry, and nearly 1 in 5 admit it's a current personal struggle. They feel the weight of that hypocrisy, which makes it almost impossible to preach with any authority on a sin they haven't beaten themselves. This creates a paralyzing fear. Pastors are terrified of being found out. One study showed that 55% of pastors who struggle with porn live in constant fear of being exposed. Their entire identity, their career, their family's future, and their reputation are all on the line. Admitting a struggle like this could mean losing everything. This fear is made even worse by a broken theology that sneaks into church culture. The idea of the victorious Christian life, where leaders are supposed to be perfect and free from nagging sin. They're put on a pedestal and expected to be flawless examples, not fellow strugglers who need the same grace they preach about. This pressure cooker creates an impossible standard, and instead of making people honest, it forces them to hide. On top of all that, many pastors just haven't been trained to handle such a complex issue. It's not a topic for a feel-good sermon series, and it's not one that keeps the big donors happy. It's ugly, it's messy, and it's just so much easier to talk about anything else. And so, out of personal shame, professional fear, and a simple lack of preparation, they choose silence. It's a silence that echoes in the hearts of the millions they're supposed to be leading. Section 3. The wounded flock. And this silence from the pulpit isn't harmless. It has devastating consequences for the people in the pews. When the church won't talk about one of the most common and destructive sins of our time, it sends a loud and clear message to those who are struggling: you are on your own. Even worse, it implies their struggle is uniquely shameful. Something so dark it can't even be mentioned in the house of God. This leaves people feeling abandoned, isolated, and hopeless. The vast majority of porn users, a shocking 84%, say that no one is helping them stop. Nearly half of practicing Christians who use it say that nobody knows about their habit at all. They are fighting a war in total secret, with no allies and no air support from their leaders. For many, the church starts to feel like a place of deep contradiction. They hear sermons about grace, forgiveness, and freedom. The gospel can start to feel there in every single day. This leads to a deep sense of shame and spiritual failure. People start to doubt if God really loves them. They wonder if they can truly be saved if they can't get over this one sin. The very place that should be a refuge becomes a source of condemnation. The pastor's failure to address the issue can even create an atmosphere of mistrust and fear that poisons the whole community. The church, which is called to be a bearer of good news, ends up offering only bad news on this subject: guilt, shame, and silence. Section 4. When help doesn't help. Even when churches do try to talk about pornography, the approach is often wrong and doesn't actually work. The focus is almost always on just changing behavior. Just stop it. It's a message about willpower, accountability software, and just trying harder. While those things can be useful, they don't get to the root of the problem. They focus on the sin without ever asking why. The sin is so tempting in the first place. This just stop it approach misses the deeper heart issues that pull people toward porn. Pornography offers a cheap, fake version of things we all desperately want: intimacy, acceptance, validation, and an escape from loneliness or pain. Telling someone to just stop without offering a better, truer way to meet those needs is like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. It doesn't heal. When churches only focus on the surface, they can actually add more shame when a person fails again. The message they hear is, you failed because you weren't disciplined enough, instead of, you're searching for something real in a place that only offers fantasy. What's more, these limited approaches often miss how widespread the damage. They forget that women struggle too, with 40% of Christian women admitting to porn use. And they almost completely ignore the betrayal trauma felt by spouses, whose pain is a direct result of this secret sign. By treating porn as just a man's behavioral problem, the church fails to care for everyone who is devastated by it. The so-called solution just becomes another part of the problem. Section 5. A path toward healing. So, with all this fear and silence, is there any hope? Absolutely. The solution isn't more shame or more rules. It's a radical return to the heart of the gospel: grace, vulnerability, and real community. The Bible actually gives us the blueprint in James 5:16. Confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, so that you may be healed. Healing doesn't happen when we're pretending. It happens in community. When churches stop being places where people fake perfection and start being hospitals where broken people can be honest about their wounds. This takes a huge cultural shift, and leaders have to go first. They have to model vulnerability and admit that they need grace too. Instead of acting like spiritual superheroes, they need to become fellow pilgrims, walking alongside their people. Pastors need to find safe, confidential friendships where they can be honest about their own junk without the fear of losing their job. The goal isn't to ignore sin, but to create a culture where sin can be brought into the light of grace, not hidden in the darkness of shame. Real ministry has to go deeper than just behavior. It has to get to the heart. It means helping people see the wounds and desires that make porn so tempting, and then showing them how Jesus offers the real fulfillment they're looking for. It's about fighting fake intimacy with real intimacy, and fighting fake acceptance with the unconditional love of God. And finally, the church has to reclaim its job as the main source of hope. It must boldly declare that pornography is not the unforgivable sin, and that there is real power in the gospel to set people free. Not just to stop a behavior, but to actually heal a heart. In summary, the silence around pornography in the church isn't just an oversight. It's a crisis that's leaving millions of people wounded and alone. But it does not have to stay this way. Breaking the silence is the first step. If this resonated with you, share it. Start a conversation with a friend you trust, your small group, or a mentor. For the pastors and church leaders watching, I'm urging you, find a safe brother or a counselor you can be brutally honest with. Your freedom could be the very thing that unlocks freedom for your entire church. This isn't a simple problem with an easy fix. It's a deep cultural issue rooted in fear and shame. But the church is supposed to be the one place on earth where fear is driven out by love and shame is washed away by grace. By choosing vulnerability over victory, community over isolation, and grace over judgment, we can start to tear down this culture of silence. We can become the place of healing. God actually called us to be a place where no one has to fight alone.